Hey guys, don't see anybody in the chat just yet. I was hoping I advertised this early enough where people would see that it was going on. But feel free to join whenever you want to. And I promise I am going to try to have this completed by 9 o'clock Eastern Time because Joe Bob's on tonight, and I definitely want to watch Joe Bob, and I'm sure there are others of you that want to watch Joe Bob as well on Shudder. So I don't want to, take up anybody's time, but I did want to pay tribute to Paul Kelman, who sadly passed away recently. He was in my opinion, and a lot of other people's eyes, the star of My Bloody Valentine, the 1981 My Bloody Valentine. He played T.J. Hanniger, one of the young miners in the movie. And I tried to find some more information, like biographical information about him, but there's really not much to find on the internet. I wish 1,000 times that I had contacted him through Facebook. I didn't even realize till after he passed away that he had a Facebook account where he interacted with fans of My Bloody Valentine, and probably fans of Black Roses as well, on a regular basis. But in I guess the last few months, his health really started failing. Evidently, I listened to part of an interview with him where he had oxygen, and he stated that he had a problem with his lungs. So as far as Internet Movie Database, they say that he died January 30th of this year in Toronto at the age of 72 years. They have illness listed in parentheses. I did go back and look at his Facebook page right before he passed, and basically someone else that knew him was letting people know that he was not doing very well and was going to be in palliative care, which I would take that to be the same or almost the same as hospice. And I don't know if I mentioned that he was 72, which, I mean, although older, there's still people that live past the age of 72, and I sincerely wish that he could have lived on a few more years. And it's really going to be, it's kind of going to bum me out because, this Valentine's Day, and I always watch My Bloody Valentine this time of the year anyway, but now it's going to be sad. It's going to hit me again when I watch it, hey, that Paul Kelman's no longer with us. Hey, Jay, you say you appreciate the Joe Bob consideration. Well, I know a lot of people really like to watch Joe Bob. I certainly do. I might not always like the movies that are shown, but I always love the banter of Joe Bob and Darcy back and forth, and just the show itself, The Last Drive-In. And so I definitely, want to take that into consideration, especially when I do one of these on a Friday night when Joe Bob is going to be on. Like I said before, there's very little biographical information that I could find on Paul Kelman. Basically, when and where he was born and when and where he died. He was born September 26, 1949 in London, England, but his family, I guess soon after he was born, moved to Canada. So I guess he grew up in Canada, but he actually was born in London, England. So that's basically it for the biographical information. If anybody else that's in the chat or that's watching and wants to put in something that they have found out, or maybe you have talked to Paul Kelman in the past and he was giving information. I did hear in one interview where he said basically at one time he was an alcoholic, so I think his life was not the easiest. I just get that feeling from the way he talked about certain aspects of his life. He was, I'll be honest, in his younger days, he was a very nice looking man. I'm not saying just because you get old, you get ugly or anything, but I'm just saying that we tend to look at people when they're younger and base what's pleasing to us by their younger days. I think a lot of people do that. And so I always thought of Paul Kelman as like the Canadian Bruce Campbell. And maybe I'm way off on that, but I always thought he looked a lot like Bruce Campbell, if Bruce Campbell had been Canadian. So he was always my favorite character in My Bloody Valentine out of all the characters that were in that film. There were other likable characters in the movie. It wasn't, when My Bloody Valentine came out in 1981, that was a time where you could find a lot of likable characters. I've said this before, a lot of horror movies that come out now, it's very rare that you can find one character, let alone multiple characters, that you can root for and, want them to make it out of this film alive. Um, a lot of times now when I watch a movie, I'm like, oh, good Lord, just somebody come and like kill these people off within the movie just so I don't have to hear them anymore. Um, but My Bloody Valentine is one of those films where there were several likable characters. And I don't know if that is something that is goes along with a lot of Canadian films more than U.S. films, or what it was, but everything seemed to gel with that movie. It's a great horror movie. It's got great special effects. Um, Although early on, a lot of those great special effects were cut out of the movie. Uh, I'm not going to go, I'm kind of going to go in order. I kind of got off on talking about My Bloody Valentine, but before I get real deep into My Bloody Valentine, I want to talk about the first movie that Paul Kelman was in. And keep in mind while I'm talking about this movie that Paul Kelman is not the main character in this movie. He's a secondary character at best. And he shows up in maybe a total of 3 scenes. But I really liked, kind of seeing his acting chops for 1971 when this movie came out. He plays a character named Andre. But like I said, he is not the main character in the movie. And the movie is called Caged Men, or it's also been called, let me bring up this, the poster for it. It was also referred to as Caged Men plus One Woman. You wrestling fans will notice there that Abdullah the Butcher is also on this movie. You see him kind of center stage right in the middle of that, the film poster. I had never seen nor heard of this film before until I went and was digging deeper into Paul Kelman's filmography. And Steve did let me know that he had a copy of this movie, and so I watched it. And it's basically about a bank robbery gone wrong, and the tumultuous relationship between one of the bank robbers. Actually, he wasn't one of the guys in the bank actually robbing the bank. He was actually the driver of the getaway car. And while they're trying to get away, somehow he ends up falling out of the car. And at first, this main character seems kind of like a buffoon, like he can't do anything right. So he kind of escapes from the fate that befalls the other bank robbers who end up getting killed. And basically, nobody gets the money because the money sinks in this lake, river, whatever it is. I guess river would be more like it. When the getaway car sinks into the river and nobody gets the money, but the guy goes back to his girlfriend, and his girlfriend is sleeping with Paul Kelman's character of Andre. And you see Paul Kelman's character leaving the woman's apartment as the boyfriend is coming up the stairs to see his girlfriend. And, at first she's all over him and stuff, oh, you got the money. And then when she finds out he didn't get the money, that nobody got the money, she turns him into the cops and he ends up going to prison. And at first he's really, reserved and stuff, and really doesn't, know what to do in this case. Number one, he doesn't seem like a guy that would be with a bunch of bank robbers because he was a college student. Evidently, you find this out a little later in the film. And I guess he just dropped out of college. and met up with the bitchy woman that, like, the woman is so superficial and bitchy that all she cares about is money. And if he doesn't have money, she's willing to turn him into the cops. And then there's a later scene after he's in prison where she comes to visit him and she's crying and stuff and saying, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, blah, blah, blah. And the only reason she's there is because Paul Kelman's character said, yeah, you should go tell him you're sorry and stuff and maybe see if we can get some money from him. Because evidently his dad or his family had a bunch of money, and she's like, I just need a little bit just to get by until you get out. So he basically tells her to hit the bricks at that point, because he knows exactly what she's doing, that she's only coming there because she wants money from him. So she goes back out, meets back up with Andre, and basically tells him, it didn't work. So the majority of the movie, the bulk of the movie, is actually in the prison. And the guy, the main character becomes pretty, his name's Elliot, the main guy. He becomes pretty chummy with his cellmate. I'm making an argument for domestic violence, Jay. No, not really. But if you watch this movie, you'll see that this woman is just, oh gosh, I hated her because of what she did to this guy. If she really loved him, she would have never done anything like that. And evidently she's a whore because, I mean, she was fooling around with him, fooling around with Andre, and all she wants is money. I mean, that's it. I don't think she's really interested in having a loving relationship at all. It's just, give me money, give me stuff. I mean, that's all she wants. So Elliot gets pretty chummy with his cellmate, and unfortunately he gets pretty chummy with another guy in the prison who I knew from the first time I saw the guy that there was something not quite right about the guy. And evidently he's, some sort of sexual deviant, where he gets off on watching guys be raped in the prison system. And he also wants to, have homosexual relationships with other men. And if they won't give him what he wants, then he resorts to violence. So at first Elliot, kind of befriends him. And this guy says, hey, I can get you the cushy jobs in the prison. So he gets him set up with working in the library, where it was obvious to me that the librarian was a guy, but he was dressed like a woman. And I was like, yeah, there's no doubt that this is a guy. But Elliot, I guess, thinks the librarian is a woman. And he gets chummy with the librarian, and the librarian basically tells the other guys, like, stay away from my boy, don't, basically he's innocent, don't do anything to him. And then the librarian tries to tell Elliot that this guy is dangerous, stay away from him. And at that time, it's revealed that the librarian is a guy. But like I said, I think everybody can pretty much tell while watching the movie that it's not a woman, it's a guy. There are a couple of very flamboyantly gay guys in the prison system in this movie as well. And as I've, said before, there's nothing wrong with being homosexual. It's just a lifestyle. And it doesn't bother me if somebody's homosexual, but there is a very violent tendency to the one guy. And when he makes advances towards Elliot, Elliot kind of says, "No, I'm not interested in, having this kind of relationship with you." And so the guy basically says, "Well, if you won't have a relationship with me, then you're going to get the hardest jobs in this place because I won't help you anymore." So he ends up being sent to the laundry, and the guy told him before, you're going to get sent to the laundry, and nobody likes the laundry. So while he's working in the laundry, the guy comes up, and he's real chummy with the prison warden as well, or prison guard or whatever. And this prison guard's pretty sadistic as well. And so they have a couple of guys grab hold of Elliot, and then the prison guard rapes Elliot. And it doesn't show a lot, but you basically, what's going on. So I think at that point, it's a turning point for Elliot. Then he wants revenge. So he ends up getting some cleaning fluid and sneaking where that very sadistic prisoner is at, sneaking to his cell and pouring the cleaning fluid in there, and then lighting a match and throwing it in there and burning the guy up. And then he goes back to a baseball game that they're having outside, and none of the guards remembered seeing anybody leave or anything, so it's kind of like, we're not going to do anything about it. What's another prisoner dying? We don't care. So then the prison guard that raped Elliot is attacking this guy that grows pot in the prison system and kind of makes money. He pretty much makes money off of that. And the prison guard that raped Elliot helps him. Well, they get into an argument, and the prison guard is trying to kill the guy that's growing the pot. And Elliot comes in and basically stabs him with a gardening utensil and kills the prison guard. And he doesn't get accused of that either. Then sometime later, he's released from prison. And he goes back to his girlfriend's apartment, and basically when it's revealed that she still doesn't want anything to do with him, she just wants money, he stabs her to death. And then the last scene of the film is him going back to prison. So when I first started watching it, I was like, this is the easiest prison system I've ever seen, because the prisoners were allowed, it seemed like, to come and go within the prison as they pleased, and to kind of do whatever they wanted to within reason. And it seemed like most of the prison guards were pretty nice to Elliot and the other prisoners as well. But then there's a scene midway towards into the movie where Elliot's cellmate gets in a fight with one of the homosexual guys, and then they punish him by lashing him with a horsewhip or something. So I hear one of my dogs coming in here. I think it's Brandon. So that was when things got they started getting more sadistic and more ominous. And so by the end of this movie, I was kind of depressed. And so I was glad that I was able to watch another movie with Paul Kelman in it that was comedic. And I'm going to talk about it in a minute here. But anyway, that's Caged Men, or Caged Men Plus One Woman. I definitely wouldn't recommend watching it if you're already in a depressed mood, because by the time you get to the end of this movie, you're going to be super depressed. Because I certainly was. Not one that I'm looking forward to watching it again anytime soon. And I was a little disappointed, well, quite a bit disappointed that Paul Kelman didn't have a larger part in it. But it was his first movie, so that stands to reason sometimes that their parts might not be as large as in later roles. So anyway, that's Caged Men from 1971. The next movie is the one that everybody knows, that is a horror fan. I can guarantee that you know this movie. Is My Bloody Valentine from 1981. And I figured out just from the year that Paul Kelman was born that he had to be a few years older than most of the cast in this movie. I believe he was probably, I think he was maybe 32 or so when 31, 32 when this movie was made. And I believe most of the other people were probably in their early 20s, early to mid 20s, I'd say. So he was probably one of the older people in the cast. But My Bloody Valentine is really, in my opinion, a standout performance for Paul Kelman. Because I consider him the lead in this. I mean, there might be other people that think maybe Neil Affleck's character of Axel was more of a lead. But I just think that Paul Kelman had those leading man qualities. I think that the movie makers, the filmmakers, meant for him to be the lead or been perceived as being the lead in this movie. And I've got quite a bit of background information on My Bloody Valentine, more so than I do the other films. So I'm going to bring this up. So I can give y'all a little bit of information. Yeah. But of course, as many of you know, My Bloody Valentine is a 1981 Canadian slasher film. It was directed by George Mahalka, and it was written by a man named John Beard. In addition to Paul Kelman, it also stars Laurie Hallier and Neil Affleck. And the basic plot of My Bloody Valentine is 20 years previous, there were miners, several miners, including Harry Warden, who were working in the mine, and the two supervisors left before all the guys were safely out of the mine. There was an explosion, and the miners got trapped. The supervisors went to a Valentine's dance instead of, remaining at their posts until everybody was safe. So Harry Warden evidently, was trapped down there with a bunch of dead miners, and he basically lost his mind and started, feasting on his fellow miners. So there's a shot of the crazed Harry Warden when they find him. And so then a year later, Harry Warden comes back to town and kills the supervisors who left their posts. And so it was almost like a Footloose type of thing, where something really bad happened in this town on Valentine's Day. So therefore, they pretty much didn't celebrate Valentine's Day for 20 years. But now, 20 years later, Mabel, the older lady that runs the laundromat in town, wants to, give back to the town, give back to the young people, let them have their dance, a dance that hasn't been held in 20 years. And so the young people, including all the young miners, of which Paul Kelman is part of this group of miners, wants to get together with their girlfriends and go to this dance. Also, there's a love triangle going on between TJ, Paul Kelman's character, Sarah, played by Lori Howyer, and Axel, played by Neil Affleck. You soon find out that Paul Kelman's character of TJ had a relationship with Sarah. Then he left and went out to California, and Sarah started dating Axel. So then TJ shows back up and wants Sarah back. But Axel's not really willing to let her go, and Sarah's not really sure who she wants to go with, what she wants to do. She's confused and conflicted and all that. So you've got a lot of stuff going on. People start getting killed off, and they want to cancel the dance. So the kids decide, or the young people decide, they're still going to have their Valentine's Day dance, but they're going to have it at the mine. But somebody doesn't want them to have this dance, and people start getting killed off in gruesome ways once again. So that's your basic plot of My Bloody Valentine. This was produced entirely over the course of around a year. It was shot on location in the Sydney mines in Nova Scotia in the fall of 1980. It was released theatrically on February 11th, 1981 by Paramount Pictures, coinciding with the Valentine's holiday. Despite a mixed response from critics and grossing $5.7 million at the box office, the film has developed a large cult following, as many of you, I'm sure, are aware. My Bloody Valentine faced notable censorship, having a total of 9 minutes cut by the MPAA due to the amount of violence and gore. Co-producer Dunning confirmed that the excise footage still existed. Attempts to release it proved difficult, as Paramount Pictures refused to offer an uncut version. In 2009, Lionsgate subsequently licensed the home media rights to the film and released a Blu-ray and a DVD with 3 minutes of additional footage restored. And the same year, Lionsgate released a remake of the film, which I'm not going to go into any detail because really, to me, it doesn't have any bearing on Paul Kelman. Although many people like the remake, I'm not too much of a fan of the remake myself. Let's see. And I think I basically gave you the plot, so I'm not going to go over that again. To mention a few of the other people that are in this film, let's see, Keith Knight, who is also, sadly, he passed away in 2007, I believe, plays Hollis. He's one of my other favorite characters from this movie. Al Humphreys, who has sadly passed away also, played Howard Landers. Helen Udy, I think's her name, plays Sylvia. For those watchers of, and I don't know if that would include very many people in the people that would be in my live streams, but for people that watched Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, she played Myra on that show. And the only reason I know that is because my mom was a huge watcher of Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman. Jack Van Evera plays Happy, the bartender, as well. And for those that people that watch a lot of Canadian horror movies, you will also recognize Jack Van Evera as the husband of Mrs. Chalmers on Funeral Home. And Peter Cowper plays Harry Warden / the miner. So, you've got several Canadian actors and actresses that showed up in other Canadian films as well. So let me talk a little bit about the production of this, since I have a lot more information on My Bloody Valentine than I do some of the other movies. George Mihalka had done an earlier movie called Pick Up Summer. And so he was approached by Cinepix, headed by Andre Link and John Dunning. You will see those two guys' names on a lot of Canadian films, not just horror films, but comedy films as well. I believe Meatballs is one that their name was attached to. With a 2-movie contract, Mihalka was asked to direct a horror slasher story presented to Dunning by Stephen Miller in mid-1980. And after Mihalka agreed to direct, John Beard was brought in to write the screenplay. The film was originally entitled The Secret, but the producers decided to change it to My Bloody Valentine so that they could overtly reference the holiday serial killer trend with which the slasher genre was becoming increasingly popular through films such as Black Christmas, Halloween, Friday the 13th. At the time, the slasher subgenre had seen further commercial success with the releases of Prom Night and Terror Train, both in 1980, and both starring Jamie Lee Curtis as well. Paul Kelman was cast in the lead role of TJ, while Neil Affleck was cast as Axel, his former friend and co-worker. Lori Howyer was cast as Sarah, the girlfriend of Axel and ex-girlfriend of TJ. Howyer arrived to the set several weeks after the other actors, as she had prior obligations at the National Theatre School of Canada, where she was studying at the time. Mihalka, intent on casting her in the role, convinced her academic advisors to allow her to finish the semester early in order to appear in the film. Shooting began in September 1980, taking place around the Princess Colliery mine in Sydney Mines, Nova Scotia, which had closed in 1975. Filming completed in November 1980. The budget was approximately $2.3 million. 2 mines were considered for the setting, the other in Glace Bay, Nova Scotia. The production company decided on the Sydney Mines location due to the exterior being a dreary, cold, and dusty area with no other buildings around. So it looked like it was totally in the middle of nowhere. Mihalka has said since making the movie, the most difficult element of My Bloody Valentine was filming in the mines, located 2,700 feet underground. Filming in the mine was a lengthy process due to limited space in the elevators. It would take an hour to transport the cast and crew to the location. Also, due to the methane levels underground, lighting had to be carefully planned as the number of bulbs that could be safely used was limited. Prior to production's arrival to the mine, the owners cleaned up the location significantly, leaving it described as a clean and colorful Disneyland-like set, which that was completely not what the production team wanted. This resulted in the production team spending an estimated $30,000 to paint portions of the mine to achieve a darker atmosphere, akin to how it appeared in its original state. Producer Dunning actually referred to the shoot as horrendous, which I have not actually heard other other people that worked on the movie say that it was horrendous. So the crew kept the identity of the killer a secret to the cast members until the end of production, when the final scene was shot, in order to ensure the actors played their parts in an ambiguous manner. Now, the big song, the Ballad of Harry Warden, which I find creepily entertaining. Although it was not credited on the film itself, the vocals for the end credits song, The Ballad of Harry Warden, as well as the other music cues heard in the film, were provided by Scottish-Canadian tenor John McDermott. In an interview with the Ghouls in the House podcast, his first and only interview on the subject, McDermott explained that he was a family friend of the film's composer, Paul Jaja, who Paul Jaja did a lot, both he and Carl Zittrer did a lot of music for a lot of different Canadian films. And just out of school when offered the opportunity to record vocals for the film. As far as box office on My Bloody Valentine, it grossed $5,672,031 US. Though the U.S. gross exceeded the film's $2.3 million budget, it was considered a box office disappointment by Paramount Pictures. No surprise there, as Paramount pretty much considers... they considered Friday the 13th to be like the bastard stepchild of the company, instead of embracing it like they should have, returning a sum of $3.3 million. This profit amounted to less than one-third of Paramount's Friday the 13th released the year before. When it was first released, it received numerous reviews criticizing it for its depiction of violence and gore. Bruce Bailey, who wrote for the Montreal Gazette, noted the film as having an awkward script, adding, and I don't see where there's an awkward script anywhere. I think the script is awesome. Adding, all that's really notable about My Bloody Valentine is it gives you more than the usual MPGP, murders per gallon of popcorn. I've never heard it referred to quite that way. Tom Buckley of the New York Times echoed a similar sentiment, writing, My Bloody Valentine probably won't make you shiver with fright, but it's almost certain to make you squirm, first with irritation, then with revulsion. The Detroit Free Press's Jack Matthews complimented the film on delivering on its title promise by bucketfuls, adding, There's nothing subtle about My Bloody Valentine. A pickaxe to the belly, a 10-penny nail to the forehead, a granite drill to the back. There are some passing attempts at comic relief, but most of the yucks are inadvertent. Ernest Leningrande of the New York Daily News noted the film as bearing similarity to other slasher films of the time, but conceded movies like this are designed to make you jump, scream, hide your eyes, hug your date, and talk with glee about what bad taste the movie makers are capable of. My Bloody Valentine does all of that. I honestly would have to disagree with every one of these reviewers, and that's why a lot of times I don't listen to reviews by reviewers, because I just feel like these reviewers are not movie fans, and more than likely they're not horror movie fans, even if they're fans of other types of movies. So I tend to take what they say with a grain of salt. Several reviewers were highly critical of the film's partial financing by the Canadian Film Development Corporation, which used tax income from Canadian provinces to help fund its production. Among them were John Dodd of the Edmonton Journal, who lambasted the film as a ripoff of Halloween. I definitely don't think it's a ripoff of Halloween. Adding, all this perverted gore is brought to you thanks to the financial help of the Canadian Film Development Corp., which uses your own tax money to help greedy, talentless producers make a killing. You should pardon the expression. Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune also noted the corporation's financing in his review, in which he awarded the film 1 out of 4 stars, deeming it a dismal and a depressing horror film, and another entry in the most depressing of film genres, the mad slasher with a knife. I really don't consider, Gene Siskel or Roger Ebert to be review examples of reviewers that I would listen to when looking for a good horror film. Um, I believe Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert have both since passed, and I hate that. I don't want anyone to pass away, but I do not consider the majority of their reviews worthy of my time, uh, because they seem to hate almost everything. Ed Blank of the Pittsburgh Press faulted the film's cinematography and mind setting, writing that its novelty for the worse as it happens is that the principal setting is a coal mine where most of the male characters work. Shooting scenes in the mine brightened only by the miners' hats permits Mahauka to play without a full deck. You can't tell what's going on. Well, maybe not in the early days, but now with the advent of Blu-ray technology, as well as I hope we will one day see a 4K of My Bloody Valentine, you can see a lot more than you used to. But I honestly don't recall not being able to see all the gruesomeness that was happening in the movie. Uh, let's see. Don Scaparotti of Cinefantastic alternately praised the film's cinematography, writing, "It is beautifully photographed and the utilization of the minds creates powerful imagery," which I would agree with. But that guy wrote for Cinefantastic, so... Writing for the Atlanta Constitution, Richard Zoglin noted that the film floats along effortlessly in the current flood of schlock horror films unleashed by John Carpenter's Halloween. It is more restrained, even tasteful, than most. The camera averts its eyes from much of the blood and gore, and women are treated somewhat better than usual. That is, they are generally allowed to keep their clothes on before being dispatched. That's one thing that I did notice about this movie, and that just reading that little quote made me remember that there's really not gratuitous nudity in this movie, for which I'm thankful for. I mean, it's not that I'm against nudity in movies, but just thinking about it, you don't see it in this movie. I mean, there is a scene early on where a female is killed in the mine by somebody dressed as a miner, but I don't recall ever seeing her breast or anything. I mean, I think she has a bra on during like that entire shot. And even though, people start to have sex and then something happens and that they don't. And even the scene in the mine with a couple of the characters, they obviously were having sex. I don't believe any nudity is shown there either. Like, I'm talking about breasts and full frontal from the woman, which you usually see in these types of movies. So I really respect the restraint used there, where you're able to, I mean, there's sex going on in the movie, but they don't show you everything. They focus more on the horrific elements of the movie, which I think is a better choice. But he praised the film for constraining the amount of violence shown. Zolan criticized the characters and the plot for being uninteresting and predictable. I totally disagree with that. Linda Gross of the Los Angeles Times said the film was too convoluted, too narrative, and oddly too ambitious to properly coagulate into the kind of exploitation movie that it tries to be. However, she conceded that the film's cinematography is sharp and the musical score portentous. So there's a few reviews or little pieces of reviews. On the review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, which I'm sure a lot of you have been on Rotten Tomatoes, My Bloody Valentine holds a 58% approval rating based on 26 reviews with an average rating of 5.7 out of 10. To me, that seems rather weak for what I feel is a great horror film. In a March 30th, 2007 issue of Entertainment Weekly, the film was ranked 17 in a list of guilty pleasures, listed among such films as Dawn of the Dead and Escape from New York, and called the most criminally underappreciated of the slasher genre. Popular filmmaker Quentin Tarantino called it his all-time favorite slasher film. But of course, as we all know, Quentin Tarantino is a lover of all things film. In a retrospective assessment, film historian Adam Rockoff wrote that the film was easily one of the best and most polished slasher films. In another retrospective assessment by Jim Harper in his book Legacy of Blood, A Comprehensive Guide to Slasher Movies, he notes that the film distinguishes itself from other slashers by moving outside the typical teen-based scenario, instead of focusing on a group of 20-something adults in a working-class community or relying on a notable atmosphere of dread. Okay, as I said earlier, this movie, when it first came out, was heavily censored. And I remember I remember reading an article in Fangoria where they showed scenes that were actually excised or cut down in My Bloody Valentine. And a lot of these scenes, including one where a girl is put up on a shower head and the water is coming out her mouth. I looked at that and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm missing all these great things. I hope that one day they can put this stuff back into the film. Of course, by 2009, we were able to actually get that. But when it first came out, it was significantly censored in North America upon its theatrical release. The MPAA, in order to award the movie an R rating, cuts were requested to every death sequence in the film. Producer Dunning said the film was essentially cut to ribbons in order to achieve an R rating. Even after cutting the film to match the requirements made by the MPAA, it was again returned with an X rating, and further cuts were demanded. And as I said earlier, stills of the trim footage were published in Fangoria magazine whilst the film was still in production. Those sequences were excised from the theatrical version. Even today, the complete uncut version has not been released although the 2009 DVD and Blu-ray release by Lionsgate reinstated 3 minutes of excised footage. The standard North American theatrical cut of the film ran approximately 90 minutes. In the United Kingdom, the film was passed for theatrical release by the British Board of Film Classification on March 30th, 1981. According to the BBFC catalog, this version ran at 90 minutes and 55 seconds. There are two reasons that are attributed to the extreme cutting of the film. It's been suggested that Paramount Pictures was keen to remove the offending footage due to the backlash they received from releasing Friday the 13th the previous year. The second reason that Mahalka attributes is that the movie was cut due to the murder of John Lennon in December 1980. And that's very unusual. Because this was a Canadian film, it shouldn't have really had any bearing on the murder of John Lennon, which was an awful, awful thing, shouldn't have really had a bearing on a Canadian film. Because number one, John Lennon was English. Number two, the murder happened in the United States and not in Canada. But go figure. But Mahalka said that there was a major backlash against movie violence in the wake of his death. So, I'm not gonna go completely into like all the restoration efforts and all of that, because I think I'll give you, enough background information uh, on My Bloody Valentine, which, like I said before, had the most information out there about it. Jay, you say hippies get their panties in a knot about movies like this. Well, I always said that I was born in the wrong time period. I should have been born where I was growing up in the 60s, because I always feel like I'm a frustrated hippie at heart. But I like my horror movies too, so, go figure. I don't know. Okay, so that's My Bloody Valentine, which I'll say it again. Paul Kelman does an excellent job. I feel like he's the star of the movie. He's, in my opinion, the gas that fuels the motor of My Bloody Valentine. Without him, I don't think this movie would be as good as it is. So, anyway, moving right along. To the next movie. This is a comedy movie that I had never seen. It's a Canadian comedy called Gas. And it centers around the gas shortage that happened in the 70s, although this movie was released in 1981. I also noticed that there were a lot of other Canadian actors and actresses that were in other Canadian horror movies. Keith Knight is in this. Sandy Curry, from who played Mitchie on Terror Train, is in this. Paul Kelman, of course, is in it, playing a character called Nino Vespucci. And I was trying to think if there was... Donald Sutherland is also in this. Howie Mandel is in this. Peter Aykroyd, Dan Aykroyd's brother. And I was amazed, though, and kind of bummed out that in looking at several of the people that were in this movie, the amount of people that have now passed. Sandy Curry passed away many years ago of toxic shock syndrome. That's very sad. Paul Kelman's no longer with us. Keith Knight's no longer with us. Peter Aykroyd, Dan Aykroyd's brother, is no longer with us. Some of these people died at really young ages as well. Or in my opinion, they did. But I was like, wow, it's really sad that a lot of these people are gone now. But let's go into what I thought about Gas. Is it Meatballs level? No. No, in no way, shape, or form is this Meatballs level Canadian comedy. It had some funny moments, a lot of slapstick, a lot of Three Stooges gags. Excuse me. A lot of really over-the-top comedy. And it's not an awful movie. It's just an okay movie. I think Paul Kelman does a good job in it. Again, I wish he was in more scenes, but fortunately, he is in more scenes in this movie than he is in Caged Men. He plays he runs with his brother a mortuary for deceased pets, and there are several hilarious scenes, and then they get mixed up in the whole gas shortage thing, and then there's a reporter running around that gets this story started. That there's a shortage of milk as well as a shortage of gas, and things get even crazier. Peter Aykroyd's character is the brother of Sandy Curry's character in the movie, and he's always like trying to come between her and her dates. She ends up having a relationship with Howie Mandel's character in the movie. To me, they didn't just seem to fit together as a couple, but whatever. Keith Knight plays a gas station attendant. But basically, the comedy centers around the gas shortage and the zany things that happen within this movie. And, I don't think a movie like this needs a really detailed plot. What I've given you is basically the plot. I enjoyed Paul Kelman's character in this. I would recommend it for a watch. Like I said, it's not a horrible, horrible movie. It has its entertaining moments. And as you can see, Paramount put this one out as well, because I see the little Paramount logo there down in the corner of the movie poster. So if you have not seen Gas, I could recommend it, especially for you Paul Kelman completists. It is an enjoyable movie, and it made me feel a lot better after I watched Caged Men when I watched this, because I felt a lot cheerier after that, because I got so bummed out by the Caged Men movie. I'm not going to go on and on about that one, other than to say that I would recommend it. But the last Paul Kelman movie that I'm going to talk about is Black Roses. And probably this is one of my, well, actually his role in Caged Men would probably be my least favorite. But next to that one, his role in Black Roses as Julie's stepdad, he is just so sleazy and trying to come on to Julie the entire movie for the most part, or almost the entire movie. It just really turned me off, but it also allowed me to see what a great actor Paul Kelman was, because he was able to not only play sensitive characters that you could care about, like TJ in My Bloody Valentine, but he could also play really sleazy characters that you really dislike. But to me, that's always a mark of a great actor or actress, when they can, do these really different roles and make you either love them or hate them. They're that good that they can do that. Jay, you say that's what stepdads are for. Yeah, evidently, especially in movies. The evil stepdads, as Joe Bob has mentioned before, they were prevalent in 80s films, especially 80s horror films. But also, sometimes it wasn't the step parents, it was the actual parents, like Deadly Friend. That's her dad, that's not her stepdad that wants to mess around with her and ultimately ends up causing her demise. But Black Roses is one of those rock horror movies, and this band called the Black Roses comes to town, comes to this small town in a kind of unassuming way, because you think that these guys might be okay, because they start out playing music that is like just regular rock music. But the kids in town start changing as they go to more and more of these concerts that the Black Roses are having. And I found it odd that nobody thought it was weird that they would come to one small town and have multiple concerts in this itty bitty small town. But, nobody seemed to notice anything until it was almost too late. But we, as watchers of the movie, know from the beginning scenes where the band Black Roses turns into demons, and that's what they actually are, demons, and they have taken over one town and, got the kids to do their evil bidding, killing their parents and such. So then they move on to another town. So we know from those first opening scenes that this band is not what it seems to be. But the people within the film don't realize this until it's almost too late. This is one of my top tier rock horror movies. I've talked about Terror on Tour before, and people like Wes and Aaron try to tell me that that's an awful movie. Steve tries to tell me it's an awful movie, but heck, I like it. But I also like Black Roses. Trick or Treat is another one that I like really well. Rocktober Blood. Most of the, more recognizable rock horror movies I like. And then some I just like to watch just because they're so bad. Those ones with Thor in them and things like that. They're not good films by any stretch of the imagination, but they're entertaining to watch. I hope you have enjoyed my little trail down memory lane, talking about Paul Kelman. I wish I had gotten a chance to know the guy. Like I said earlier, I didn't even realize that he had a Facebook page until after he had passed away. And of course, it's too late to do anything about it at that point. And so I have been collecting videos and interviews and the like that a lot of it has Paul Kelman on it. Then there's other like My Bloody Valentine reunion stuff that he is not actually on, and I don't know if that was because his health was failing at that time and he was not able to be there. But I'm collecting all this information because what I'm planning on doing eventually, I don't have the burner that allows me to burn Blu-rays yet, but hopefully in the next few months or something, I can get that. What I'm wanting to do, and please don't ask me to make you a copy of it or offer to buy it for me. These are primarily going to be for me and I guess for Steve, because I don't want to get sued by, I don't want to sell stuff that, or even give away stuff that somebody may claim copyright infringement, and I don't want to go to jail, or I don't want to go to prison, and I don't want to pay any hefty fines. But I just wanted to make something nice for myself and for Steve. And, I was thinking of putting these interviews and things on it, having the actual movie on there, having the commentary that Steve and I did on there, maybe having an audio thing with the Ballad of Harry Warden on it, just different things like that. And I also discovered that there are printers that will actually print on the discs, the DVDs and the Blu-rays. And I had no idea. And they print pretty nice imagery, or they're capable of printing pretty nice imagery on the disc itself. So it kind of looks more professional. And then I was going to put them in like Blu-ray cases, and I've got some tutorials that show you how to make Blu-ray covers. I was just going to kind of do my own thing, see what I could come up with. But that's a few months on down the line, a little bit. And you're probably thinking, well, if you're not going to sell them or give them away, why are you talking about it? I don't know. It's just a hobby type thing. I just like coming up with different things to do. But Jay, thank you for stopping by and hanging out with me. There might have been some other people watching. I was hoping that there would be more interest in this, especially since Paul Kelman passed away recently. But evidently, that must not be the case, or else I'm too boring to watch and listen to. I don't know. But I've got your PayPal. Yep, I sure do. But anyway, I am going to. Did you learn stuff, Jay? Well, good. That makes me happy, because I know that I was basically reading off the screen some of the stuff about My Bloody Valentine, but I was trying to intersperse some of my feelings about the movie as well as reading some of this stuff. So I'm glad that you were able to learn some stuff. Maybe you might be interested in some of these the movies that I talked about, maybe that you haven't watched. Because like I said, I had never seen Gas or Caged Men before. You say everyone is getting booze and prepping for Joe Bob. Actually, speaking of booze, I got my booze this afternoon. I got some coconut rum, and there's one of those bots in here again. I guess they were watching, maybe. But I got me some coconut rum. I think I might mix me up a drink here a little later while I'm watching Joe Bob. But I can't drink too much because I have to go on site to work tomorrow. It's my Saturday. So I can't get too crazy with that. But anyway, I'm going to cut this thing off for the night. And I'll be back later on with something else, hopefully more entertaining. God bless you, Paul Kelman. You are certainly going to be missed. Not just in horror circles, I'm sure in other circles as well. But anyway, thanks again, Jay, for stopping by. And I will be back soon. Bye, guys.